Hello, everyone. Welcome to Secure IT, where we discuss all things cybersecurity, people, trends, and products. Today, of course, we're going to focus, of course, on the man behind the products, but we're going to talk about products a little more. So, thank you for joining us on our continuing journey as we visit the supply side of cybersecurity, so to speak. Our guest today comes from the world of large business and has seen and continues to oversee cybersecurity products and operations in scales that could only be measured in orders of magnitude. From the US Foreign Service, CTO at Verizon Enterprise Solutions, to global CISO at Fortinet, the widely published security expert Jonathan Nguyen has literally seen it all. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Melvin. Yes, yeah, we've seen a lot in the last 25, almost 30 years now in cybersecurity. So yeah.
Great, and appreciate you being here. It's been a while, since we've had someone talk to us from the product side, and you will add a little value in terms of talking about connectivity and carriers. So this is going to be a fun conversation. Jonathan, as we usually do, we start with the person and we end with the person. So our success in this podcast has been talking about the man behind the aura and the image and the product, so to speak. So, I alluded to a little bit of your journey, but an MBA, prestigious MBA from none other than George Washington, on to Verizon, to Fortinet, Foreign Service, some prestigious board positions as well. Walk us through your background, your career, and the various
Yeah.
choices that you made to get here.
So I didn't start off as a cybersecurity person or in technology. As I started off with training in economics and in IT systems, and really as a diplomat. and the route that led me from the Foreign Service into what was then first, Bell Atlantic as one of the first product managers for managed firewall services. And that evolution of running a managed service towards writing a business case and being part of the leadership team that built into what was Verizon's MSS line of business. And then ultimately, at about 16 years, running the data breach investigations report, running that team, and then really taking the experience of having run an MSSP, of being an operator, being a strategist, being a CISO, and then seeing how the market has actually performed. I think what frames my perspective in cybersecurity, especially at this point in time. So after about almost 30 years now in the industry now spends this year forecasted about $188 billion in network security, with Gartner forecasted in the next 2 to 3 years should go to 225 to $230 billion, right? But what is it about our industry in the state? So there are four statistics that really frame that. The first is that 99% of all the vulnerabilities exploited last year were known for at least a year. In fact, our Fortinet FortiGuard research indicates that the most prevalent version of malware has been known for more than a year. So it tells you we fail on basics of vulnerability management. Second, the number one cause of data breaches that came out of my shop at Verizon and the DBIR was that we've passed more data breaches in clouds and on-prem. So we're at that inflection point. And the number one cause is misconfigurations in public services and clouds. Okay, that's the third one comes from FortiGuard Labs, which says that 83% of data breaches are caused by simple human error. And so we like to think that in cybersecurity, there's a maturity curve somewhere between first blind, and then we buy products from great vendors, and then we go to reactive. And then we start collecting things like intelligence and AI, and with the hope that we go from reactive to proactive. And then ultimately, as we move into AI and artificial networks, we reach that nirvana state of no longer looking at where the hockey puck was, but where it's going, and we become predictive. But the practical reality that given that 70 to 72% of all data breach notifications were delivered by the ransom demand, by third parties or law enforcement, we're actually blind. And so after all that time is spent, the real question I focus my career on is that why after all this time, investment and money and time and energies and careers, do we fail on the basics of simple intermediate controls of vulnerability management, asset management, configuration management, security awareness training, multi-factor authentication, right? To me, that is my career goal at this point, is helping people, get it right moving forward.
Jonathan, You've probably answered all my questions in that opening salvo, but well done. So we're now, I believe, in our third year. Melvin, who's listening in and running the audio for us, would probably know better. And if I had a dollar for every time one of our guests said, "Look, it's back to the basics," I'd probably be able to retire by now, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Last guest, Kyle, who's a senior editor at CRN, was interviewing CEOs at RSA.
yeah,
And it's an article that's going viral right now, but most of them, cybersecurity CEOs of large companies, are saying the same thing. We want to integrate, we want to get back to the fundamentals. We've also seen that just about the time that we've got on-prem security down to a science, COVID hits, and
yeah.
now we're in this work from anywhere environment where the learning curve has been initially pretty steep, and which brings me gently into my next question, right? So you have, and before I ask that, if you could please share a few of the links from the labs and the reports, we'd be happy to put it up when we
Yeah.
post this podcast, because that's the kind of trending information that we want our viewers and listeners to pick up on, please.
Philip, do you want to
Yes.
really know how to find out where the state of the industry is?
Yeah.
You you look at the Fortinet report, you look at the
Uh-huh.
Verizon report. In fact, you look at any reputable cybersecurity industry
Right.
body and
Right.
look at the reports. In fact, don't even look at the reports. Look at the executive summaries. And what you'll find is they're about 90% the same. And the big finding about these reports is not what came out this year or last year. It's the fact that the findings are largely the same. And you know that because the recommendations are largely the
Yes.
same.
You are right. You're absolutely right, and of course obscured to a great extent, like I believe you said 72% on ransomware, right? So we're seeing that as a
And
filter.
if you deconstruct ransomware,
Right.
what is ransomware? What are the systemic challenges in cybersecurity that make ransomware so pernicious?
Right.
What is it? Ransomware is a reflection of lack of proper visibility and control on endpoints, on assets, on vulnerability, on configuration management, network segmentation, multi-factor authentication. Ransomware takes advantage of the systemic failures in cybersecurity to consistently and persistently apply simple to intermediate controls.
Right.
That's where we fail.
I agree, and you also alluded to in part of the reports the people, right? The starting
Yeah,
point there. So, in your opinion, and I know we digress, but I'm sure I look forward to this. So, let's go to the starting point. We talk about endpoints. Let's talk about the starting point of
yeah,
ransomware, and we've talked about the big ones
yeah,
and laptops
yeah,
left in, and man in the middle attacks. How much of
yeah,
that at the start?
yeah,
I agree with you on network segmentation
yeah,
and IAM and all these
yeah,
controls that we can put in.
yeah.
But at the start, what factor is the actual people on the
Sure.
systems?
Yeah. Well, it's no single factor. One of the
Right.
biggest trends right now is that we no longer should operate in silos because the problems we encounter and the adversaries we face don't approach us or appear in silos. So the practical reality you just alluded to is that these simple to intermediate controls of security awareness training, asset management, etc., they are actually pretty complex and pretty hard. And in fact, you alluded to the fact that there are now articles that come full swing. In fact, in places like Gartner that says, hey, multi-factor authentication is hard. Zero trust, there are ways of circumventing zero trust. And so I always reflect upon the four questions that anyone will ask you in the aftermath of a data breach or a serious disruption. It is always, what did you know? When did you know about it? What did you do about it? And now, given this 2.0 and the focus on risk management, was that reasonable? And so the question you should pose is this. If we know that those things are hard to do, and we know that there's a consistent 6% failure in security awareness training, and that there are problems across these simple intermediate controls, the answer lies in what are your compensating controls? And one of the things I like so much about products and solutions, like whether it's zero trust network access or SASE, it is the automated posture check that ensures on a per session level that Jonathan is truly who that user is, that that device is truly his, has been assigned to him, has been properly configured, properly patched, and should be allowed access to the network. And then at a per session level, at layer 7, does Jonathan have permission and a need to know to access that particular application? And so one of the things that what I like so much about the future is our ability to automate our ways around the things we know will fail, the compensating controls that are inherent in automated posture checks that go so much to ensure the fundamentals are done. And I'll tell you this, if those fundamentals were done on automated posture checks that ensure role-based access controls and the implementation of zero trust principles, the vast majority, I would say well over 90% of all of the well-known data breaches and disruptions would have been mitigated. And I
Absolutely.
think that's the biggest insight I would give from my 25 years in cybersecurity. Whether you're looking at OPM data breach, Equifax data breach, whether you're looking at the Ed Snowden affair, Reality Winner, Eternal Blue, NotPetya, even the latest cases from the airmen in the Massachusetts Air National Guard. Uh, the ability to automate those zero trust principles, role-based access controls enforced in a consistent fashion, and understanding what your network looks like, and especially your data, you begin to see how we actually do have the tools to address the vast majority of our problems. The
Yeah.
challenge is that we are humans and we are technologists, and we are so focused on the shiny new object, that what the industry calls the known
No.
unknowns.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
I I would argue that if 99% of the vulnerabilities exploited were known for at least a year, and as FortiGuard Labs has shown that the most persistent malware out there has been known for more than a year, then the earliest demonstration of reasonable care in identifying and managing risk is the ability to mitigate the known knowns. I would humbly argue that if you can't demonstrate the ability to mitigate the known knowns, you have no business trying to mitigate the known unknowns, right?
Amen.
Yeah,
Amen. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. And um, first a quick couple of housekeeping notes. I apologize to our producer for the few dings in between because he's trying to keep this very, very clean and secure, but my phone goes off. And two, Jonathan, I
yeah,
know we said, 30 minutes, but we might go a couple of hours. This is
yeah,
just an amazing conversation. So for the future, you talked about SASE, CASB, we're talking about ZTA and all that
yeah,
good stuff. And that is, question 304. Um, let's come back to the
yeah,
next question, and this is, where we are today, right? Your
yeah,
your role. So, if there's anyone, and whoever hired you at Fortinet, God bless him or her, because you come with the skill set that's needed for the timing of where. So we started with on-prem, we went into the cloud, we now work from
yeah,
anywhere. There is a great focus on
yeah,
connectivity,
yeah,
and you're working for a company that, or you're leading, product strategy for a company, Jonathan, that was, Magic Quadrant leader in SD-WAN. Was it last year, I believe, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so the conversations that we often have on here is that
yeah,
we've gone away from the traditional firewall that we can
yeah,
see and touch and
yeah,
geoprem
yeah.
to, this concept of insider threat being anywhere, Jonathan. I mean,
Mhm.
our insiders today, as we talk here in North America, our insiders could be sitting anywhere in the globe, right? And these are
Sure.
people with credentials who are logged in. And when we talk about the future, we'll talk about
Yeah,
verifying Jonathan, not only at a moment in time, but continuously verifying Jonathan so he doesn't switch with a clone. But the question for you is, in your current role, what are some of the cybersecurity trends that
yeah.
are top of mind,
Mhm.
especially in this new age that is
Yeah.
now work from anywhere?
So I think the first trend that spans all of IT is the idea that we should stop working in silos and converge. Because in the last year, the number one focus I've seen across boards and teams and conventions and trade shows has been an extreme focus on the user or the customer experience. There's an idea that user experiences equal better business or mission outcomes. And if you focus on what is an enhanced user experience, it's really nothing more than highly responsive computing operations. And so the object of the exercise in cybersecurity really isn't about security. It's about risk management and business enablement. And so if the object is the user experience, we are seeing a convergence of technologies. And that's what you see in things like a ZTNA and SASE, this idea that you can't really think of computing alone. In fact, our first projects in IT and computing, those DARPA projects that linked desktops and mainframes on a campus, were local area network. Then we linked those campuses, that became a wide area network. And then we went into the cloud, and now we use software to find wide area networks. And now as computing is shifting from clouds to the enterprise edge, and the cloud becomes more a repository for storage and curation and analysis, right? But the practical reality is that computing for time immemorial spans and moves across the dynamics of centralized and distributed computing, depending on where it's most useful. So the first lesson is that you need to be able to provide secure and seamless access for any user on any device from any location to any application wherever it's hosted. And so the idea that you can do that without consistent visibility across your LAN, WAN, data center, cloud, and enterprise edge network edges is the realization that we're working with, that most CIOs and CISOs fully understand that going forward, in order to mitigate the known knowns, as well as detect the anomalous behavior that is indicative of the known unknowns, you have to have visibility and control across networking, security, and compute for risk management, but more importantly, I would argue, for business enablement. And so, whether you look at cybersecurity mesh architecture or SASE, these are all things that reflect a need to converge networking and security and integrate that with your computing wherever that is.
Known knowns versus known unknowns, and of course, putting front and center. We always do this at the beginning of every year. What's big for the upcoming year, right? And I
Yeah.
think the Fortinet Labs report should be posted at the beginning of the year, so we have a year's lead. And
Ah,
speaking, I mean, like, look, here it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
Here's the cliff notes on what you need to look for. So, Jonathan, the question I'm going to dig in a little deeper on is, and without you revealing anything that's going on deep down in the research labs at Fortinet, but what's the next big play? As I still stay on this question of
yeah.
trends
I think
for
then,
Fortinet.
yeah, the next big play is the acceleration of campaigns of attacks that will leverage huge volumes of data, leverage AI
Right.
to create highly accurate, highly responsive personas that will make phishing campaigns even more effective. So right now, the research suggests it takes 8 to 9 dedicated attempts to become 100% successful. But you will see AI being leveraged to identify vulnerabilities faster, but also to create and monetize exploits in a faster. So you see a tremendous acceleration. And so I think the underlying issue for CISOs and security professionals is this: how will you address security at speed and at scale with high orders of fidelity? And so that means really getting your arms around a very distributed computing environment that's also now decentralized, but also the ability to handle vast volumes of data. And so it's about accessing the data in a data fabric or a security fabric, if you will, applying AI and machine learning to understand the context in which things are occurring, and then the ability to leverage the integration so that you can identify and mitigate at speed and at scale. And by the way, while you're doing all that, the business requirement is to enable these really incredible user experiences at sub 5 millisecond levels, because that's really 5G, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and it's inevitable. I know this sounds strategic and like a plan, but looking at the convergence of two things, right? The volumes of large data that we're being subject to now for with lack of choice, and
yeah,
AI is here to stay. There's no doubt, right? Irrespective of the number of White House meetings we have to say it's good today or it's bad for you or
yeah,
whatever it is. This is an inevitable convergence,
yeah.
and we've got to deal with it, and we've got to use this acceleration
Right.
for remediation. So,
So
well said.
they go hand in
Yeah,
hand, right? So the
absolutely,
idea data-driven decision making relies upon big data. So whether
absolutely.
you like it or not,
Yeah,
AI is here to stay because we're using data to create better user experiences, more efficient allocation of resources for shorter operating cycles, but essentially better results, right? And by the way, if you deconstruct that, that's all computing has ever been about: the application of
true.
data to drive better results
Yeah.
at increasingly accelerated paces,
And
right?
and
So
if I make a humble pitch here, Jonathan, the people are quick to forget that there's one more leg to this big data
yeah,
AI stool, And that's the human intelligence piece,
Yeah.
and that just is front and center when I talk to guys like you know, who get it, who can see the big picture, who've got that 30,000 foot view, that the convergence of, you know, big data with AI and human intelligence is actually a beautiful place to thrive
Yeah.
for us as we move forward. So moving on, you know, as much as I would like to dwell for an next hour on this great conversation, we may reserve the right to have you back. Your peers, right? CISOs and other organizations, large and small, wake up in the morning, and usually there's whack-a-mole, right? It's 1,700 users that are having problems, and if that isn't enough, Jonathan,
Yeah.
there's the board that's saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, look, I need to protect my rear. You tell me if we're in compliance. Have we meeting GRC requirements? Why is the
Yeah.
cybersecurity
Yeah.
review that we've just answered failing?" Right? So the CISO is pulled in different directions, and
Yeah.
with some empathy for the role of CISO, what are some of the information technology areas that you would like,
Yeah.
you know, your peers to focus
Yeah.
on?
So yes, the CISO job is more varied than ever before. It's more stressful than ever before. Forbes came out with an article, this seminal moment in our history of CISOs. 2 years ago, they said one of every six CISOs, some 18%, are functional alcoholics or drug abusers.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
are you
there was
serious?
a
Can you repeat that, please?
there was an article in Forbes about 2 years ago that
Uh-huh.
said one of every six CISOs
Wow,
functionally medicates using drugs or alcohol. That means,
that's a lot. That's
dependency.
15 to
Uh,
20%. Yeah,
18%. The Hedricks
18%.
and Struggles
Uh-huh.
CISO survey 2022 for the first time indicated some 53% of the respondents said they are more concerned about their personal health than the actual anxiety of a data breach. So the presumption is that we're under consistent attack and persistent attacks, that we've been breached. And the only question is whether you know about it. And so at the same time now, the CISO role is not just technical, it's a business role. And so I would say that in my experience amongst my friends and my peers, some 60% of the job is not technical. It's about evangelizing. It's about the consistent application of security controls across the organization. So CISOs now not only have to manage risk and cybersecurity risk and business risk, they need to also understand the how do you enable securely the CMO's omni-channel customer engagement model. How do you also work with the chief privacy officer with regards to California Consumer Privacy Rights Act and its corollaries across GDPR, the European Union, the states of Nevada and Virginia? And at the same time, how do you ensure, per the standards, that you've undertaken a reasonable level of due care in the identification and the management of risk? And ultimately, that's what they're trying to report back to their boards on. And so CISOs today, I suggest, and I mentor some 32 CISOs today, mid-market to Fortune 20. And I emphasize the ability to demand that they have a very good grounding in things like finance, understanding the efficiency and velocity of capital, understanding what the concerns are on ROI and TCO and business impact. Likewise, understanding HR and marketing, right? And so one of the tools that I stress is one, the strategy wise, a consolidation strategy that brings together networking and security, and then analytical tools that give that status, right? The current state. Are we yellow trending green, or heaven forbid yellow trending red, or heaven forbid red? But also at the same time providing digital experience monitoring to understand the ability to do what we call synthetic testing or simulated experiences, to say at any given moment, can my customers in Sao Paulo really access those applications that are hosted in Brazil? And in doing so, you can begin as a CISO or security professional, show the business side of the house that indeed, for per Fortinet's research that says once you implement our SD-WAN solutions, you ought to see a 65% reduction in network disruptions. And that means better user experiences, which should translate into more and better digital interactions, more e-commerce, B2B or B2C transactions, which means more revenue. And so what I'm seeing is that CISOs right now not only are focused on the traditional ITIL metrics of mean time to detection, mean time to mitigation, mean time to remediation, and your vulnerability management schedules, right? But now they're also marrying those types of IT metrics to business metrics in terms of digital experiences, latency, packet loss, and jitter, as well as security, event information, as well as your computing. And I think that's the real key moving forward, is the ability of that CISO to demonstrate visibility in terms of network performance, security performance, and how that supports computing to deliver that better user experience. And so what a lot of CISOs are asking for today is to make the other aspects of networking and computing more approachable for their security teams, and to really be a business enabler, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well woven together, Jonathan. You had me at the 18% alcoholic, and here I am trying to suddenly hide my blood pressure monitoring cuff. Right?
Well,
Unbelievable.
I tell you, when I left my last gig, I was 30 pounds heavier. I was diabetic. I had hypertension and cholesterol.
Wow.
And 6 years into Fortinet, most of that's disappeared. And the other research out there is that 40% of all CISOs know something about Lipitor, statin, metformin, right?
This
And when
is
I,
sad. This is, sign of our times. Absolutely right. And,
yeah,
I like the concept of the user experience. You talked about, connecting with the CMO and, omni-channel directions. GDPR is something that you brought up, and I believe we ain't seen nothing yet, right?
yeah,
Someone's going to grammatically fix that statement. But, China is coming out with new privacy, or mending their
yeah,
privacy. India is coming out with like a 400-page
yeah,
privacy law. You raised Nevada.
yeah,
I see Nevada, and I give you all 50 states are going to have some flavor, right? I mean, every
yeah,
time we hit an accept cookie on a website,
yeah,
we've got to track this darn thing for
yeah, yeah,
businesses, small or large. Your
yeah,
local taco stand has got to be compliant. And then, California leads
yeah,
in this area
yeah,
in terms of legislation.
yeah,
So, exciting and very complex times. And
yeah,
God bless the role of the CISO. Let's talk about the future. You've
yeah.
alluded to the future in each of these questions. You've talked about SASE. We used to talk about CASB as
Mhm.
the starting point. You talked about user experience, right? Isn't it always about the user experience in
It's
the
always about
future?
that.
And the fact is that we're probably, the millennial is kind of sorta our customer, but your future customers are more the Gen Xers and the Gen
Yeah.
Ys who are saying, look, you know what? Gone are the days of writing your password on a post-it note. I mean, I'm dating
Hmm.
myself with that. Today, your potential customer or your future customer is saying, why the heck do I even have to worry about my password? You know who I am. You do whatever you need to do,
Yeah.
whether it is, a tenant on zero trust to verify me. You alluded to all the factors and all the vectors that go into verifying Jonathan. I'm going to add time to that, right?
Hmm.
Are you the right person at the right time? Why is Jonathan sitting in the
Yeah.
parking lot at midnight trying to look
Yeah.
at payroll data? Yes,
Sure.
he's CISO, but he shouldn't be doing that. So, given all this, given the fact that organizations like Microsoft and Google or Facebook are saying, look, let's try to head towards a passwordless world,
Hmm.
given that companies
Yeah.
like the one
Yeah.
that I'm part of are looking
Yeah.
at continuous behavioral authentication. We're saying, look,
Hmm.
let's not just verify you at the front door when you ring the bell and you swipe your PIF card, but let's
Hmm.
check you every few seconds so that you don't swap out with, an AI generated clone, right? And so these are fun times, Jonathan, right? We
Yeah.
can roll up to Chat GPT and say, sing me a song, or generate a picture of, the meeting we just had, or whatever it is. So where are we going? What is the future of
Yeah.
cybersecurity?
So cybersecurity is going to become more seamless. So the macro trends of convergence are there. You will see cybersecurity, networking, and computing operating as one solution moving forward. And we shouldn't operate in silos because silos create latency. And we are all about acceleration for user experiences. I think there's a shift coming that you alluded to. This fundamental idea that up to this point, CISOs were protecting their own enterprise's intellectual property. Now they're assuring someone else's intellectual property, their customer data, right? And so I think the connected citizen, the digital consumer is going to be much more aware moving forward that his or her data now has value because data is brokered. The minute you go onto any browser, it's brokered, it's monetized. So I think moving forward, what you're going to have are relationships between connected consumers and enterprises, whereby there is a compromise, a request that you as an enterprise will be a reasonably good custodian of my data, and then you will bring me into an ecosystem where I will be paid for every interaction. And that begins to shift the source of wealth creation. It is the ultimate expression of what we call the democratization of technology. and it's that the connected citizen is enabled. They're now part of an ecosystem where data is currency. And we as CISOs in security need to do two things. One, we need to manage risk, which will only grow as the quote attack surface increases across a highly distributed and decentralized operating environment. Second, we need to maintain that reasonable level of risk management while enabling that business. So there's going to be a handoff. There's going to be a bit of a compromise about what is reasonably good security. So you'll see a balance of both identification, protection, prevention, response, recovery, and governance, right? So it'll be all deeper across the board. NIST 2.0 will add governance to the five elements of NIST 1.0, but you'll see that. And what it draws upon, though, the larger considerations of CISOs is this: how on earth am I going to get from an average of some 50 products, as Ponymon Institute will tell you is in the average enterprise, down to from products to platforms where I can integrate and automate the identification, protection, prevention, detection, response, and governance models to get to what you're talking about, which is understanding every user on any device from any location, accessing any application at any time, and doing that at speed and at scale. And so at the heart of what you discuss, and in fact of all data breaches, has been one thing, 100% almost, either the compromise or the abuse of credentials. Data breaches
Yes.
don't occur without that. So I remember the conversation I had with a member of one of these nation state APT organizations. I said, "How on earth do I defend against someone like you?" And this gentleman said, "Look, whether you're at the NSA or you're at the GRU, the FSB, or GCHQ, they target networks, weaknesses in networks, and then they target the sysadmins. So hunt your sysadmins. Always ensure you really understand who has elevated privileges and what they are doing. And it's an incredibly democratized world. I will tell you, a lot of the research actually suggests when we talk about bad guys, they're not bad guys. Some 40% of quote threat actors are actually females. And so
Bad gals, huh? Okay.
I think they're just bad people, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And but
Interesting.
but across that universe, there are only about 225,
Wow.
250 known threat actor groups or consortiums or
Right,
syndicates
right.
that use formal and informal teaming methodologies to actually execute attacks and
Yeah.
campaigns. So I think the future is going to be an environment that's very distributed, highly decentralized, always under attack, where it's like a ship that constantly leaks. You're keeping moving. That's going to be our jobs,
Yeah.
but we'll leverage technology more and more. There'll never be enough security people, and so my prediction is this: given that networking and security always follows the compute, and our compute is going to be, especially in the mid market and the enterprise level, some combination of in-house as well as computing as utility. It'll be a very hybrid operating environment that continues to move across centralized and distributed computing. And it's going to be our jobs to figure out how to manage risk in that environment, right?
Amazing. You are definitely passionate about your trade, Jonathan. There's no doubt about that. I'm going to take some creative liberty here and slip in two quick
Yeah,
30-second conversations, right?
yeah,
So, one, I think we just solved for world peace in as much as we understand the changing role of the CISO.
yeah,
And, each administration that comes in, and I consider, the United States leading on cybersecurity posture, both for private and public, and things like, you alluded to NIST too. There's a refresh coming on zero trust tenants. There is things like the SEC is coming out with the fact that now members of boards
yeah,
have had a fiduciary relationship. So
yeah.
each successive administration is doing better. It's much like saying, "Hey, the GDP has gone up on my watch," right? It's only natural that they're doing more. 30 seconds. I'd like you to comment on government taking a leadership role with cybersecurity posture, and if I may slip in the second 36 question, 30-second question at the same time, is your opinion on artificial intelligence.
So I think it's a good thing that someone in a centralized role begins to create a constant state in cybersecurity governance, right? So we have a frameworks to work by. I would stress that I'd like to see better performance as well. So it's great to issue guidance, but if anyone looking at at the sources of NotPetya and Eternal Blue, all the way through our incidents with a certain airman in the Massachusetts Air National Guard says, well, these are great frameworks and guidelines. I'd like to see a better implementation. But that really is
Right.
reflective of this. Cybersecurity is hard, and it's hard for people even with the deepest budgets and the deepest staffs and nation states. It's hard at every level. And so I would like to see not only good guidelines, but an understanding that I prefer incentives to sticks, right? Carrots to sticks.
Absolutely.
And so I prefer to see incentives rather than punishments. And I think that's how we actually drive the performance in the industry up, and not just from a governance or compliance standard side, right?
Sure, cybersecurity with a smile, right? Let's take away FUD, and
Oh
let's
yeah,
just, yeah,
I'll tell you, as a CISO, the last thing I wanted to see a vendor come in was tell me how bad the market really is. I said, trust me, I wrote the report. Yeah, I know exactly how bad it is.
right, right,
Right?
right. Absolutely. And the airman you alluded to a couple of times was a 21-year-old airman, right? I mean,
Right?
this is a kid.
I would say nothing is more eye-popping than looking at the use of Eternal Blue and where Eternal Blue came from
Right.
and how it was executed and not Petya, the most destructive incident in the history of our industry. I'll leave it at that.
No kidding. So again, I'm dating myself, but it was, I don't know what it was. It was LimeWire or something like that. And there were these horror stories of CFOs coming home, their kids taking over their laptops and loading LimeWire. And before you know it, financial strategies were uploaded along with a
Yes.
dozen
Right.
songs, right? This
Right.
is back in the day.
Yeah.
And it's again, it's back to the fundamentals, Johnson. It's
Right.
well stated.
That's
Um,
why I came to Fortinet. I
yeah,
mean, the selfish plug is this. After seeing all of these failures, and why can't we get it right? And then the need to have integrated technologies
indeed.
across networking and security was why I came to Fortinet, because of that Fortinet security fabric, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. 5 seconds. AI,
AI.
yes or no?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely. Yeah.
emphatically.
Yeah. You can't get away from it. Might as well embrace it.
I hear you. I mean, there's a reptilian fact, right? A reptilian brain result to us, and we're afraid of what we don't know. And this is not Terminator, honestly. I don't know. I mean, I may eat my words a little later. As of now, AI in moderation, right?
It's the known unknown. So we know it,
Exactly,
right? Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's end, and I cannot wait to ask you this question. The moment you said, you're 40 pounds lighter, and I think
Yeah.
Lipitor free. So
Yeah.
let's talk about you for a moment. Your
Yeah.
relationships, you being human.
Yeah.
And this is where our guests just give us some fantastic responses. So no pressure here, but let's talk about
Yeah.
the influences on your career.
Yeah.
Your core values, your family, your mantra, please.
Yeah. So in every conversation, I search for how do I add value and how do I serve. I think all things start with how do I add value to the conversation. It's all relationships. All of my success has been due to the generosity of folks who have led me and have mentored me. So all due success to that, and that's what they've all told me. Go ahead and pass it forward. That was their only request, and so today, I have the great honor and privilege of mentoring some 32 CISOs in the industry, and that starts with at the lower levels. Those are quarterly meetings, and at the high levels in the Fortune 100, those are just annual meetings where we talk about what's next. Do you want to serve on a board, public, private advisory board? How do you get into the trade? How do you move and elevate your career? Do you want to be in the top 1% of CISOs around the world? Should you get an MBA? Should you get an executive MBA?
Beautiful.
And certifications, all those basic types of questions that everybody wants answered, but nobody knows who to go to. And so, how do you get a recruiter that takes you into the Fortune 500? How do you move on from mid market to enterprise to Fortune 100 CISO jobs? How do you crack that code and get to
Right.
that table? Right? Yeah.
This has been a very fulfilling conversation. I somehow feel at the receiving end of our fire hose, Jonathan, and this consider a fair warning to the family that tonight I'll be reading in a little more detail the transcripts of this conversation. But boy, absolutely loved every minute of the conversation, and thank you so
I
much for
appreciate
being
it.
here. Right, and
Yeah.
if I may take the liberty to say that our listeners can look you up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Let's make it 32 plus one or two out of this podcast that you're mentoring. But thank you very much for
Yeah.
your for everything that you're doing in influencing trends and paying it forward. Great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Philip. It was fun. Thank
Th-
you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Secure IT as I continue the cybersecurity discussion with customers, vendors, end users, and employees, helping us to learn from their insights and knowledge from their experiences. Make sure to follow this podcast for free on Google, Spotify, Anchor, and wherever podcasts are hosted. Please do DM me on LinkedIn or Twitter with feedback, questions, kudos, or comments. Thanks again, everyone, and see you next month.